The wind rolled low across the Wyoming plain, carrying dust and the smell of dry grass. Evening light spilled gold over the land, turning fence posts into long shadows and setting the distant hills aflame. Caleb Mercer stood at the edge of his ranch, hat pulled low, watching the horizon like it might answer a question he'd been carrying for years. He had learned not to expect answers. Life on the frontier taught a man to work, to endure, and to keep his grief quiet. Caleb had done all three since the winter his father froze on the North Range and his mother followed him to the grave 6 months later. At 27, Caleb owned more land than most men twice his age, but there were nights when the house felt too big and the silence pressed in on his chest. That was the night he saw her. She was riding hard, her horse lathered and limping, a thin figure silhouetted against the burning sky. She nearly slid from the saddle when she reached his gate. Caleb was moving before he thought. He caught her just as her knees buckled. "Easy," he said, steady and low. "You're safe." She clutched his coat like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her hands were trembling. "They're coming," she whispered. "I didn't know where else to go." He didn't ask who. On the frontier, a woman riding alone at dusk usually meant trouble had already found her. He brought her inside, settled her on a chair by the fire, and poured water into a tin cup. Her hair was dark, dust-streaked, her face pale except for 2 bright spots of color on her cheeks. She drank like she hadn't tasted water in days. "My name's Anna," she said finally. "Anna Whitmore." Caleb Mercer. The name meant nothing to her, but she nodded anyway, like it mattered. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. She told him her story in pieces. How her husband had died in a mining accident. How the claim he left behind attracted the wrong men. How they'd tried to take what little she had, land, money, and dignity, until she ran. "I didn't want to be brave," she said, staring into the fire. "I just didn't want to disappear." Caleb understood that more than he wanted to admit. "You can stay," he said simply. "As long as you need." She looked at him then, really looked, like she was trying to see if kindness could be trusted. Something in her shoulders loosened. That night, he slept on a chair by the door with his rifle across his knees. Old habits, old fears. The men never came, but Anna stayed. At first, it was necessity. Her horse needed rest. She needed time to think. Caleb needed help after a spring storm tore down half his fencing. They worked side by side, quiet but steady, learning the shape of each other's days. Anna rose early, brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and sang softly while she worked. It was an old habit from a life that felt far away. Her voice filled the house in a way silence never had. Caleb didn't talk much, but he listened. He learned she'd once dreamed of teaching school. That she missed the ocean she'd grown up near. That she was afraid of the dark, not because of what it held, but because of what it reminded her of. Some evenings, they sat on the porch and watched the sky bruise purple and blue. The land breathed around them. "You don't have to carry everything alone," she said once, after a long stretch of quiet. He stared out at the hills. "Been doing it a long time." She didn't push. She just stayed. The trouble came the way it always did, loud and uninvited. 3 riders appeared at the fence one afternoon, dust rising around them like smoke. Caleb knew the look of men who thought the world owed them something. He stepped out to meet them, rifle in hand. "We're looking for a woman," the leader said, smiling without warmth. "Dark hair. Talks pretty." Caleb's jaw tightened. "No one like that here." The man's eyes flicked past him, toward the house, toward Anna, standing in the doorway, pale but unflinching. That night, Caleb moved Anna into the back room and loaded every weapon he owned. The past he'd tried to bury rose up sharp and clear. He wasn't losing anyone else. The attack came just before dawn. Shots split the quiet, glass shattered. Caleb moved like instinct itself, driving the men back with steady fire. One fled, one fell. The third ran when he realized this ranch wasn't an easy prize. When it was over, the sun was rising. Anna found Caleb by the fence, blood seeping from a cut on his arm. Her hands were shaking as she pressed cloth to the wound. "You stayed," she said, voice breaking. "You didn't have to." "Yes," he said, "I did." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The world felt raw and newly made. "I don't know where I belong anymore," she whispered. Caleb looked at the land, scarred, stubborn, alive. Then he looked at her. "Here," he said, "if you want." She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her, the steadiness beneath the fear. She rested her forehead against his chest, and he froze, then slowly, carefully, wrapped his arms around her like he was afraid she might break. She didn't. They stood like that as the sun climbed, two people holding on not because they were weak, but because they were tired of being strong alone. Days turned into weeks. Word traveled fast out here, and no one bothered the Mercer Ranch again. Anna planted a garden. Caleb fixed the roof. Laughter found its way into the house, shy at first, then bold. One evening, after a long day, Anna took Caleb's hand as they sat on the porch. "I don't want to run anymore," she said. "I want to choose." He swallowed. "I don't know how to be what you deserve." She smiled, soft and sure. "Neither do I. That's the point." The stars came out one by one. The land lay quiet, listening. Caleb leaned his forehead against hers. "Stay." "I am," she said. "Only you." The wind carried her words across the plains, and for the first time in his life, Caleb Mercer believed that home wasn't just land you defended, it was a heart you let in.